Thank you for joining the Northwest Local School Board meeting on September 21st. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Chris, do you mind taking roll call, please?
Mr. Gilbert,
Here.
Mr. Detzel,
Here.
Mr. Yoshimura,
Here.
Mr. Teetsort,
Sorry, here.
Mrs. Detzel.
Here.
Thank you, Chris. Matt, are there any legislative updates?
I have a couple things to share. So on September 14th, Governor DeWine signed House Bill 606, which is a bill that prohibits bringing a civil action for damages for injury, death, or loss to person or property against, and it's added businesses that already apply to state, local governments, and schools, but also added that due to the cause of exposure to COVID-19. And also, the Senate Education Committee has been holding hearings to provide school districts the flexibility and relief during the pandemic, mostly relating to testing, teacher evaluations, graduation and promotion requirements, and state report cards for the next 2 years. And then on September 11th, House Bill 166 was ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. District Courts, and that's a transfer. I don't know, Todd, you want to help me out on that, what that one was?
That's the territory transfer where someone could petition, and all it takes is one person to petition to have their boundaries they live in attend another school district. Some votes in the state, it passed 1-0. Some it was 44-16, on and on. But that was proven to be unconstitutional. Where you live and where your school district boundary is where you go to school.
Excellent.
Right. And that's all I have for legislative update.
Thank you, Matt. Todd, do you have anything else for that?
Nope, that's it.
All righty. Jim, anything for Butler Tech?
Just, I'm sure everybody's going to realize that we're not going to have the all boards meeting out of Butler Tech, obviously, because of the COVID. And then I talked to John Graft, and everything is going smoothly out of Butler Tech, and everybody's adhering to the social distancing and wearing their masks, and no problems.
Great.
Other than that, everything else is good.
All righty. Now we move into 10.1, report from any employee organization.
We had none.
Okay. And how about community comments, Todd?
We did not receive any community comments.
All righty. And that moves us to 11.1, the adoption of the superintendent consent items.
Yes, so in the superintendent consent items are the personnel items, general business items, which is the master facility grant. What this is getting everything zeroed out. There was some money left over from the new schools because of adjustments made on the teacher lounges where they have their lunch and can collaborate on the tables. Vendor contracts are none that were not budgeted for, and donations to the local schools. So I am trying to pull up this. Hold on one second. Also, we had donations to the Northwest Local School District. The donations were the Cohorting boosters, who donated 10 Yamaha guitars and cases. The Backyard Giving Fund, which is Duke, was a donation check. Jersey Mike's gave out coupons for the Mount Healthy Elementary staff members. And the Great Parks of Hamilton County donated $1,000 to the fund for art supplies for Northwest High School, which is greatly appreciated. So the superintendent recommends The Board of Education approve the adoption of superintendent consent items as listed.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments?
Just that those coupons were for the Montfort Heights Elementary. I think I might have heard you misspoke.
I think he was channeling his old days back in Mount Healthy.
Yeah, you heard that too,
I
right?
probably did. It is
Right.
Montfort Heights in their location. So they're great partners. The coupons were worth $7 each.
Right.
That's great. Thank you to all the donations, the boosters, and I guess one of our student achievements might be a big guitar jam session here.
Yeah.
When we're back in session.
Those were greatly appreciated.
I can't vote.
It says voting in progress, but I don't see my yes or no. Okay, got it.
Great. The superintendent's consent item passes 5-0. Next is the adoption of the fiscal consent items. Amy?
Yes, so good evening.
Hi, Amy.
First is the special meeting minutes from August 31st. So to ask the board to dispense with reading of and approve those minutes. Additionally, we have the financial reports for the month of August. We have a little over 64 million in all funds cash, and our general fund unreserved balance is almost 30 million. For our revenues year to date, we're at 30 million, or 32% of our projected revenues are property taxes. We've received our second half property taxes, which are coming in right on target, so that is great. And our expenditures are about 15 million, or 16% of our projections, which is equal to the 2 months that we've had by the month of August. So right on target as far as our revenues and expenditures. Our investment weighted average of return was 0.75%. It continues to decline. Last August, we were at 2.24%. So that shows you the difference in just 1 year in our interest revenue. And our monthly bills, we have our routine monthly bills, as well as we purchased some technology supplies and Chromebooks. We paid our property insurance. We had some staff and student software renewals. Gym floor refurbishing, some pandemic supplies were ordered as we geared up for the year, and we have auxiliary and grant fund payments for our non-public schools. We also have to ask you to accept and appropriate and approve funds for several grants. One was the broadband grant from the state of Ohio, and then we also have 2 grants for Colerain High School for learning grants, and PRE also acquired 2 learning grants. So with that, I'd like to ask the board to adopt the fiscal consent items as listed.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments for Amy? Great. The fiscal consent item passes 5-0. Thank you, Amy.
You. And I also have our fiscal year 21 permanent appropriations. So by law, we're required to adopt our permanent appropriation before October 1st of each year. We passed our temporary appropriations in May as we were gearing up for our year. Our permanent appropriations, mainly our changes to the general fund, it has been reduced a little over $4 million. This is due to staying within our 3% partnership agreement with our community, as well as we had $2.6 million reductions due to RIFs last spring, and also carryover of $1.3 million of encumbrances from last fiscal year into this fiscal year. So with the carryover encumbrances and the RIFs, we needed to reduce our current year budget down almost $4.2 million to stay within our 3% partnership. So that's the major difference in the permanent appropriations. All the rest of the funds are listed. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'd like to ask the board to approve our permanent appropriations for fiscal year 21.
Amy, I have a question.
Yeah.
With the reduction and what happens if we have an emergency and something comes up? Typically, there's some money somewhere to handle that stuff. Are we pretty tight, or how are we set? If something comes up, and do we have any money to deal with that? And if not, where would that money come from?
Okay, so we, right now our forecast, we're still working on the November forecast. Luckily for us, the reductions from the state haven't been the whole 10%. It was more like the 6. So as long as they don't reduce any more for the year, our revenue will be up a little bit higher than we were projecting last May. Taxes right now are coming in normal, so there's no reduction there. We did project a small reduction due to possibly foreclosures or the downturn in the economy and the hardship of our community. So with those two items, pretty much higher than we were anticipating last May. That's a good thing, and hopefully we'll come in right at budget. Right now it's a little bit still deficit spending slightly. We also passed the resolution to dip into our cash reserves. So if we need to, emergency comes up, the state makes reductions again, things like that, we have passed the resolution to dip into our reserves as long as we pay it back by the end of 2022. We have that option also.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Is there a motion?
So motion to approve the fiscal year 21 permanent appropriations.
Thank you, Matt. Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jim. And that permanent appropriations passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Next is the special education handbooks.
Yes, the next item is the 2020-2021 Special Education Handbooks. They are being presented as items for information only to be considered for approval at the next board meeting in October. In the handbooks is Home Instruction Handbook and the 504 Manual. So this is information. Any questions you let me know, or any questions you have, please let me know, and Heidi Stickney and I will get you any information you need.
Great, thank you, sir. And that leads us into the superintendent's update.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to go over something. I'm going to try sharing my screen here in a minute. We have now made available our district COVID tracking chart. I'm going to show you where you can find it on the web page. So I'm going to share my screen here. If you'll just give me a second. All right, here is the home web page. And on the bottom of the screens, as the pictures go across, you can see there is an NWLSD COVID link. So if you click on this, it will then go to our COVID-19 information page. And if you scroll down and look to the right-hand side, you'll see the Northwest Local School District COVID Tracker. If you click on that, our COVID tracker will pop up. So you might say, why are we doing this? Well, this was a requirement by the governor so that parents and community members could see what was going on in the schools. So we did this out of fulfilling the requirement. The graphic below is a COVID-19 tracker of the reported number of quarantines and positive cases within our buildings throughout the district. This information will be updated every Monday. One of the key things to remember is that quarantines listed in the chart below include individuals that have been identified by the Hamilton County Public Health Department as close contacts to COVID-19 situations that have occurred inside or outside of the school environment. So just because you have quarantines, and a lot of them at one school, doesn't mean it was because of something that was going on inside school. It can also go on outside. So as you scroll down, you'll see each school listed. We'll start with Struble. How many staff positive this past week? 0. How many in quarantine? 2. How many student positive? How many in quarantine? 1. That is listed for every school as you go down through here. So you can see Colerain L, Houston Early Learning, Taylor Elementary, Montford Heights, Pleasant Run L, Colerain Middle, Pleasant Run Middle, White Oak Middle, Colerain High School, Northwest High School, and then district offices, which is also transportation and alternative programs. So this will be available to everyone to check at any time they would like. Again, you just open up the nwlsd.org webpage and you will see it listed there.
Can I break in with a quick question?
Yes, you can.
So are those numbers we were just looking at, those are current numbers
Those are numbers for the week.
for the week? Okay.
Each Monday they will be updated. So trying to find out where it went.
Meaning they're not year-to-date numbers, they're by the week.
Yeah, they're by the week. But if you look, for example, if you're quarantined for 14 days, this one student quarantined for Struble could be on there for 2 straight weeks.
Okay.
But these are updated weekly. So numbers will increase, numbers will decrease. Some may stay the same. So if you look back at Struble next week, these numbers could be identical with no new cases because they've been quarantined for 14 days and are still on it.
So is the quarantine for 14 days and doesn't matter whether they get a negative test or anything?
I'll go over that at the end. I've got some stuff to read that describes it to parents and everything. There's so many different options. That's a very difficult answer to give. So
Okay.
Matt, if you want to go ahead and put the agenda back up, I'll continue with my update. Some of the things I'd like to remind you of, similar to what Matt was asking, is that quarantines are not all due to who is identified as a positive case inside a school. Like I said, they can also be quarantined for outside issues of school where other family members test positive, or maybe a teacher's quarantined because their kid tested positive in another school district. So that's an important piece to remember. The next item I would like to talk to you about is our cohorting model, K through 12, in particular, the high school model. We are constantly communicating with our parents about issues they have with remote and in-person learning. Recently, we have heard a lot of concerns over the in-person learning, specifically at the 2 high schools. We have set up a system that allows limited contact with staffs and students. As you look through the numbers I just showed you, it's very evident that cohorting is working. One of the most impressive things we have seen is that when we get a positive test, we are only quarantining 1 to 3 other students or staff. This is occurring directly because we are not changing bells and having students and staffs exposed to 4 to 5 different times during the day, like changing bells in the hallways or going to a new group of students that could have 20 to 30 students in it. With cohorting, as we've said in the past, that does not occur. This is not the way we wanted to return to school, but it is by far the safest and most effective way to return, and will, in my opinion, allow us to stay in school all year, where I don't think that'll be an option for others. Our staff is working hard on their instructional strategies for in-person learning and making changes daily. Kids have access to lessons being taught and can sign up for extra help from a teacher at any time who will stop by the room or arrange a personal Zoom meeting with them to cover what they need help with. We will continue to work on in-person learning, whether it be by Zoom or recorded lessons that students can access at any time. I fully understand the importance of parents wanting teachers to be in front of them, because our teachers are awesome. And it is easier to learn science and calculus and English and art and music. But at this time, it's not the safest way to do it. And we're only about 12 days into school with kids being there. But being in the middle of a pandemic and the daily changing of the virus, we will remain in our cohorts for the first semester. We will reevaluate at the end of the first quarter for options that could create change for our second semester, assuming cases are still tracking low in our schools and our communities. I had a student email me today. They wanted to know if they could do remote learning for the year. And yes, that's an option that we were allowed to do by the state. But also understand, when we started the school year, we assigned teachers to remote learning and we assigned them to in-person learning. You can't just change the schedule you put together and worked on. And we did work on it based on what the guidance was from the governor and based on what's happening with the Hamilton County Health Department. I can tell you that we are in a much safer environment when it comes to a positive test than others, because we know we have seating charts for everywhere we are. We're not changing classes. We can track their interactions. And when the Hamilton County Health Department looks at quarantines, they're going to look at, did you know where this kid was from this time to this time? If not, then you got to quarantine them. So we will reevaluate at the end of the quarter, see how things are going. But I also can tell you we have outstanding teachers who are changing how they instruct daily and doing a great job with offering different ways to get instruction to them. So I would again like to remind everyone that our staff are the key folks for us staying open. So by going to a cohorting model, it allows that to happen. Remember that our certified and our classified staff have kids who attend other schools. And if their child happens to be quarantined, then they have to stay home with them. And then they are quarantined because their child tested positive possibly. Things can change rapidly though. And with COVID outbreaks, you don't know what's going on from one week to the next. So we will always monitor our data. We will use data over time to make decisions in collaboration with our health department and see how many close contacts we have. But, you know, the school district itself, some parents are disgruntled because, and I don't blame them, they want their kid to be in school, but they're quarantined because of a close contact inside of school or outside of school. And it is a 14-day quarantine at this time. Even with a test, once you go to get tests, there are additional days that are added on. So we have some cases where kids are going home with a couple of the symptoms, and then they go to urgent care to get released because they're symptomatic, or they go to the family doctor, or they go to Little Clinic or somewhere with a doctor that can give them an excuse. But if they test at that time, that changes the rules that Hamilton County has. And that's why I say it gets so complicated and so confusing if you look at what can occur when a person was involved with someone who tested positive, or when they've been quarantined because they're around somebody who tested positive. So I want to go over a little bit about the quarantine and exclusion information from COVID-related situations, and hopefully this clears it up. We remain committed to keeping our families and community informed. Below, we have written general information about quarantines as it relates to the staff and students in order to answer and address any questions. So this is posted on our webpage, or will be, and sent out to our parents. Contact tracing process. Contact tracing occurs every time the district is notified of a positive case. We work directly with the Hamilton County Health Department in every case. The Hamilton County Health Department, who is also notified by testing sites about every positive case, reaches out to our district if the positive case is related to one of our staff or students. This two-way communication ensures we are able to respond to any positive cases within the district in a timely manner. Every quarantine and exclusion case is analyzed closely by our COVID response team. And due to individual circumstances, procedures may vary case by case. We have also taken extra steps to ensure the staff and student safety by developing an internal contact tracing team. In August, Northwest Local School District utilized federal care funds and hired Krista Bowling, a nurse with Hamilton County ESC, to work with our district nurse, Kiva Bryce, to carry out extensive contact tracing. Again, this was not from the general fund. It was from the CARES funding, which was designed specifically for purposes like this. The quarantine process. Generally, staff and students will be required to quarantine if they test positive for the virus, or if they are identified through contact tracing as a close contact to a positive case. If someone is placed on quarantine for either of these reasons, they will be unable to return before the end of the quarantine period. If a staff or a student stays home ill or is sent home ill, they are expected to monitor their symptoms. They may be excluded for a period of time, but could possibly return before the exclusion period is over due to a negative test, doctor's notes, or other medical information. If staff or students return early, they must be cleared by a doctor. Inquiries regarding return to school dates and documentation for students should be directed to the building nurse or health assistant. Return dates can be verified, but medical information about student and staff are not able to be shared. Close contact is defined as being within 6 feet of someone with a positive result for a period of 15 minutes or more. Anyone within 6 feet of you for 15 more minutes is in your bubble. This means if you test positive, they will be placed under mandatory quarantine. And if anyone in your bubble tests positive, you will be placed under mandatory quarantine. This is true for contacts at school and outside of school. And I want to make it very clear, this doesn't matter if you have a mask on or not. If you're within 6 feet, that is the bubble. That is the most important piece. Do not allow folks in your bubble, because mask or no mask, that can cause you to be quarantined. We have isolation rooms added to every school. Students sent to the isolation room are evaluated by staff using a screening tool. The nurse will make determinations based on individual student situation and medical history about whether a child is to be sent home or returned to class. Students sent home are given guidance from the school nurse about how and when returning to school is possible. So I'm going to stop there before I go over a couple more things. Any questions about the quarantines or the contact tracing or anything we can go over? It's very difficult and it's very lengthy. It's time consuming. And just so folks know, when I was talking about the COVID tracker, since our kids returned to school, we've had 6 positive staff tests and we've had 5. So in the first 2 to 3 weeks of school, once we started and kids arrived on the 27th, 6 positive staff and 5 positive students. That will become part of our COVID tracker, and we will list it month by month and update it so they know how many cases are there. But just because there's a positive case of a staff member or a kid in school doesn't mean they contracted it there. Again, it could possibly been contracted outside of school. So
Todd, do we have any benchmarks against other districts, just so we can see where we're doing in relation to maybe some different educational models that may be out there?
Yeah, I mean, we are talking constantly on Fridays with the other superintendents, those who are changing bells, going 7 bells and letting kids change. Their quarantine is about 30 on the average when a kid tests positive, where our quarantine average is 1 to 3 kids. So now you have 30 kids who are being quarantined for 1 COVID positive test. And the majority of those kids are not testing positive, but they're still quarantined. So our system itself is keeping our kids in school, 1, but it is also making sure that because of what we are doing, we're not losing 100 to 150 to 200 kids at a time for 1 or 2 positive cases, which is what's happening in some of the secondary schools around the tri-state area. A lot of schools are still not even attending school and going remote because of things like this. The cohorting, like I said earlier, will really allow us, I have no doubt, unless we just run out of staff, but our staff's doing a great job. They're being professional, they're being responsible inside of the workplace and outside the workplace, that we can continue for a long time. But these other schools who are seeing 80 to 100 quarantined because 1 or 2 cases are really starting to wonder what they can do. So I hope that answers your question.
How many students roughly do we have that are in school right now?
Okay, so right now, we started out the year averaging about 30 to 35% in remote learning. We're now up to about 40%. So I would say 40% of 9,000 is on remote learning. So you're looking at about 5,000 in school and 4,000 on remote.
And staff, how many staff?
Staff, it's hard to say how many we're using for remote because it depended on how many at each school is there. So I would have to get those numbers back to you, but it would depend on how many chose remote at each school. So for example, at Montford Heights, only 25% chose to do remote learning. At one of the high schools, they're at 45%. So there's a different amount of staff at each building.
So if we have roughly 1,000 employees, I mean, I don't know how many of those are teachers.
Yep.
I mean, we have at least 700 teachers in the buildings. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably closer to 800 in the buildings.
So, and if we're doing 40% of that 9,000 of kids, even if it's 3,600 kids, and we've had 6, I mean, obviously we don't want any, but 6 kids out of 3,600 or 4,000, and 5 teachers out of that many, I would say for a district this large, we're doing really well.
Yeah, I would agree. It's pretty outstanding. And not only does it show their professionalism inside of school, and because they're the ones creating the seating charts, our classified and our certified employees, the kids are doing a phenomenal job with the mask and their distancing, phenomenal job at their breaks in time, lunch and other areas. And then outside of school also, it takes an entire community to make this work, and people have listened and have bought in. But it really makes a big difference when you're in a cohort mode, and you're only with the same 20 kids all day long, and then 2 or 3 staff members rotating in. It just really, it takes the statistical part out of it, where when you don't have as many contacts with others, you have less of a chance contracting COVID. So it's been very successful.
And I've talked to some parents and some teachers, and I get it. For a kid, that's got to be boring, honestly, being in the same room all day long and not getting to move around and so on and so forth. But I think the other thing, just looking at the numbers and how well we're doing, not only is it keeping, we're not having to have so many staff members and kids out to quarantine, but we're also doing our activities. The kids are able to play their sports and many of the extracurriculars. And so all those numbers are included in that as well. So, we've got to be doing something right when the numbers are that low. So I would just like to say great job to Akiva and actually the entire staff, and the students, for doing such a good job, because I know we're all tired of this, and believe me, I want to close my eyes and wake up and this all be over. But sometimes people don't compare apples to apples. We're a very big district and we've got very low numbers. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, we're very pleased with how things are going. The system has proved to do really well by our kids and by our staff. And again, if you look, these numbers are even lower if you look, did they contract them in school? So the thing that I'm happy about is a quarantine, because if you think about it, with a quarantine, they chose to go in person. And if we're not quarantined very many, because of cohorting, kids aren't sitting at home doing remote, which is what the parents didn't want to begin with. So I think that's another huge advantage also. Another thing that Lindsay wanted me to talk about is a thing called Peachjar. And it's not dessert, but it's a pretty cool item that we'd like to talk about. Northwest Local School District is taking extra precaution to limit the amount of germs that are transferred through paper handling. So in an effort to provide parents and students with increased access to programs and resources that improve the trajectory of students' lives and decrease the potential of spreading germs, NWLSD has partnered with Peachjar to create a digital platform where parents can access school and after-school community flyers and resources. The new platform will enable our district to send important school and approved school flyers to parents digitally, saving our schools time, money, and paper, but also ensure the parents directly receive the information. School-approved digital flyers will be sent to our parents' email inbox, where you can easily click to sign up for events and programs. Parents do not have to do anything to receive the flyers. They will come to you automatically. All I would say is check your spam if you're not getting any, because sometimes it'll shoot stuff to spam automatically. So flyers are scheduled to be sent out every Thursday. We tried to do one day a week so parents know which day to look for them. So we encourage our parents to look for the Peachjar flyers each week in order to stay informed. So just another safe way to get information, and something that if the community knows they want to put something else, they go through Lindsay Creasy, and she will make determinations on what goes out and how it goes out.
My take on Peachjar as a parent is it's about time, because I think like you stated, if you're checking your spam and you have email, you're getting it. You're not taking the chance that, my son or somebody, your daughter is going to, get that flyer from the teacher and make it the bus ride home to make it to the parent. Just takes it off the teachers to have to, pass them out to all the students, and just seems like a pretty good thing anyways.
And Lindsay's ideal of being sent out every Thursday. I mean, I know as parents who used to have kids in high school and middle school, if I know what day to look for things, makes it a lot easier. And if it's consistent, it's just a great tool mechanism for parents to use. So I would agree.
Just the savings of the paper and ink also.
Yes, very much so. And like Lindsay said, she wrote this up for me, so I'm basically reading what Lindsay put together. But Chris McKee and the Treasurer's Department and Lindsay, they've all tried to go as much paperless as they could. They are working so that money doesn't have to exchange hands for tickets to events, and trying to make that a permanent thing. Parents don't have to send money to school anymore. They can load up the kids' accounts with money on them if they're looking at lunch or other things. So all they have to do is access their students' accounts. They can put the money there. We're just trying to make it so no one is handling cash or passing germs as we go. So this is just another way to do that. So, I didn't have any community comments or staff, like anything from certified or classified, but I am getting a lot of emails from high school students, and I can't tell you how neat that is. They are being vocal. They are speaking about themselves. They're asking great questions. We had a student today who asked a question about why can't I get my personal email on there and access it through the school drives. But we do have certain regulations we have to follow that keep kids safe. So I sent back to him a response that Matt Fisher and I talked about, and very receptive. Was glad that we did respond. Like I said, we had another young man who was in Butler Tech and doing remote learning for us, wanted to know if he could continue remote learning for the year because he's successful and doing things that way. So it's just good to hear from the kids too, especially when they speak for themselves, they reach out, and they try to work for what's best for them. So I think that's important for you guys to know. As Jim mentioned earlier, the last thing I want to remind all of you is that next week was supposed to be the next October board meeting was the all boards meeting. That will just be a regular board meeting that we'll have for the district. So we will still have a board meeting. It just won't be the all boards meeting up at Butler Tech. So I wanted to remind everybody of that, but the date will stay scheduled and it'll just become a regular board meeting. And that's all I have.
Great.
Todd, I have a quick question. Is Chris McKee on?
I believe so.
Okay, I meant to ask this actually a little while ago. I noticed we had a sign down at Pleasant Run Middle. I don't know if it got backed into or whatever. Just curious, is that going to get replaced? Is that something that we're going to have to pay for?
Yeah, that was a sign that was damaged by a parent.
Okay.
And we've contacted the insurance company, and they are paying for a replacement.
Awesome. Yeah, I meant to ask before and I forgot. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Todd, I've got a couple of questions. How are we doing with our PPE supplies and things like that? Are we having any issues getting that delivered to the schools and supporting the staff?
No, I mean, and Chris McKee's online too. Chris, chime in if you want. But as far as I know, we have the masks that are available to any kid who forgets on the bus once they enter school. Cleaning supplies are readily available. So everything we need in terms of PPE, special education units, giving them gowns to put over their body, mask when needed, not only a mask, but a shield because of special needs, and just making sure our staff is protected. So right now there is plenty of supplies to go around. I'm not seeing any shortage anywhere. Our bus drivers are doing a great job of cleaning their buses after students drive or ride on them and they drive them. So as of now, everything is going really well. And I think it's like we talked about at the very beginning in August that there were some concerns that we'd run out of supplies. We're not. I mean, everybody knew about this in advance.
Right.
And we have to have them in order to be safe.
I asked not because I heard anything. I was just curious.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I work in the
Good
medical
question
side
nowadays.
and we struggle getting some stuff for my staff. So I was just kind of curious. And how are the staff adjusting to the PPE and things like that? Do we have any folks that are struggling, that not personally, but other groups or anything? How are we doing with that?
I don't know. I would say there's stress everywhere. We continue to meet with our union weekly to talk about any concerns that are out there. I think the stress really mounts when an outside setting or a family member might get COVID, and then you have to worry about that, then come to work. It's little things that you don't think about. Like, we've got teachers who love to teach, but now all of a sudden a kid or a family member's got it and they're quarantined. So they're like, geez, now I have to stay at home. And that's becoming a big issue with a lot of school districts. Teachers don't want to stay at home. They want to be with the kids because they're seeing success. And these are our teachers in the cohort model. But in terms of cleaning and wiping what they need to, all they have to do is ask or check with their principals. We made that clear when we met with each individual school. If there's something you see that you're not happy about or you don't like, make sure you mention it. And teachers are doing a great job communicating. Administrators are listening, working with our custodians. So quarantining will cause us to clean some rooms, and we do what we have to do.
Great. Anybody else?
So I have a question about transportation, because it seems I think this kind of falls under no news is good news, because in recent years, transportation at the beginning of each school year seemed to have had hot topic situations, and I haven't really seen or heard any complaints this year. Is that accurate to say?
I'm gonna plead the fifth here. No, I agree with you 100%. And I tell you what's more amazing, Matt, and the rest of you, they started the year with all three being quarantined and working from home. And Yolanda and Matt and Bob and Christina did a fabulous job. On top of that, our bus drivers really stepped up, because it's a little different when you're coming to work for 2 weeks and there's really nobody in the office because of quarantines. But our bus drivers did a great job. I think it is a little different because we don't have as many kids riding buses. Where I thought some issues would come is in our parking and dismissal, but parents are doing a fantastic job dropping kids off, moving along. Our schools have great systems set in place. There are adults stationed everywhere. Going to get a little tougher when it starts raining more. I mean, what are we on? Almost week 2 of no rain. When it gets cold and starts snowing, that changes it. But I tell you what, our staff at all our buildings have put great plans together. And so far, things are going well. We always worry about busing athletics around, because at any time, something could happen there. I mean, if you talk about where are you the closest proximity to anybody, it's sitting side by side on a bus. So far, so good, knock on wood. And we continue to look for good things, but it's just like anything else. At any time, COVID could get our staff going. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that.
How's that first on, last off going with loading the buses and unloading? Because I know that was a concern with some parents, that I guess typically you had the older kids would sit in the back and younger kids in the front of the bus, but loading them back to front and then unloading that direction, that's based on geography and not the grade of the students.
Right. And I can tell you our bus drivers are the key to that. They've kept handwritten seating charts. They've kept other seating charts that they've been required to put together. They're staying on top of it, and the kids are doing a good job. And I'm going to say, if somebody forgets a mask, it's usually at a bus stop, but our bus drivers have them right there and pass them on to them. So far, so good with that.
That's good to hear.
Anything else? No? All right. So that moves us into board member comments. Joe, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the parents check that COVID tracking thing. That's really important to keep them informed as far as their own school is concerned. But if the superintendent's chain of command is accurate, then hopefully we'll get through this together, from all the way from the administrative offices all the way down to the custodians and everybody in between. And we're trying to make this as painless as possible, but keep everybody safe. And one more thing on a lighter note, is as family business, my brother won his 5th Emmy Award last night. So I'm happy about that. But I'm glad that everything's going well with you, Todd. I mean, as far as your direction and leadership and that. That's it.
Thanks, Joe. Pam?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much said as far as thanking everybody for working together and continue to be patient and hopefully one of these days we'll be looking back and say, remember when. But one thing today that it did bring a big smile on my face is I was turning onto Pippin Road and I waited because here comes the Northwest Knights cross country team. And I can't tell you how good it felt to see those kids out there practicing and getting their mileage in. And I turned left and headed all the way down Pippin, and I could hear, I mean, they were running, and one of them was, you know, they were talking, and it just, cross country will always be near and dear to my heart, but it was just really nice to see that the kids are out there and able to participate in the things they love to do. So good luck to all the kids and all their activities, and everybody stay healthy. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Jim?
Yeah, just want to reiterate what everybody has said. And Todd, you guys are doing a great job. Just from what other schools have gone through and that, I think we are absolutely doing a fantastic job, and want to commend all the employees, teachers, staff, transportation, custodians, everybody. Just keep doing what you're doing. And like Pam said, let's get through this and we can move on.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Matt?
Yeah, I just kind of like to ditto what everybody else has said and thank the students, the staff, the administration, the parents, everyone involved to keep our community safe, whether they're in person, whether they're at home. And like to wish, all our competitors from both Northwest and Colerain, because I was at the Colerain football game on Friday night when one of the players was injured. And that's one of the most horrible things, to sit there and not know what's going on. And then it's bad enough that they call for EMS to take him off the field. But I was reassured that Colerain football posted a picture of the young gentleman, Romel Martinez, if I pronounced that properly. I hope so. Apologize if I didn't. That he was back at film on Saturday morning and smiling from ear to ear. So I was glad to see that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. I'd like to a special shout out to Kiva for, I know that her role has changed a lot this year, probably from not literally, but from like probably previous years, some hangnails here and there, to her job role has completely changed. And there's a lot of Kivas behind the scenes, I think, this year that their roles have changed dramatically. And as all the other my peers have said, a big shout out to you guys. The building leadership team, our transportation team, our parents, as Todd said, our parents are integral for our kids being compliant to the guidelines and models that we have to follow now. Matt, thank you for bringing up our football player that was a little sobering Friday night, watching them put him on a backboard and carry him out. It puts things in perspective quickly. And then the last thing I want to say is, I'm proud of the district as a whole. I had sent an email out to everybody a couple weeks ago, and the one thing that we do have is each other, and we all have a lot of experience together. In this season that we come into this school year, it was basically all uncertainty. We had no idea. A lot of stuff was, this is what our prediction is going to be, and here's how we'll try to handle that if that plays out. But the constant in this equation is we do have history with each other, and I think we've relied on each other, and that's what's given us the success that we've had so far this year. So I don't want people to underestimate the experience that we've had with all of our staff and our community over the years. We're pulling through this thing strong so far, and I'm very proud of that. to have minimal isolations when an event occurs is, Todd and I were talking about this yesterday, is just monumental. I mean, 10 times less than the average school district. That's huge. And if any person that we can eliminate from contracting this, even though, there's all kind of speculation about the seriousness of COVID, this and that, if COVID has your genetic number, it's got your genetic number, and it can be a bad outcome for you. And the fact that we can help mitigate that to our community is a huge responsibility, and I think we've really stepped up to that. So, accolades to you, Todd, and to your team and everybody that's involved in that. And that's all that I have. And so with that, we'll adjourn our meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
Get me to the vote. There we go. Thank you.
Great. And with a 5-0 vote, we are adjourning the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and watching the school board meeting. Have a great week. Stay safe.